is 9/11 Freefall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I'm your host, Andy Steele. Tonight we're going to be talking about the fallout post 9/11 anniversary. I don't have a guest this evening. There's a lot of news to go over, so I want to catch up with that. So before I get into all of that, we're going to do what we do every week. We're going to take our 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We'll do that starting now. And that's 10 seconds. So here we are, another 9/11 anniversary is wrapped up, and it's becoming sort of a tradition on this show. Not really intended to be a tradition, but it just seems to happen every year that I don't have a guest following the anniversary. I think 2 years ago I played clips from the Rethink 9/11 event, and then last year I was sitting right here in front of the microphone with you, like I am tonight, talking about the fallout from the previous anniversary and going over some of the news there. And here we go once again. I think a lot of people put so much effort and energy into the 9/11 anniversary outreach efforts that everyone's kind of relaxing and recollecting their bearings after that. So that is very cool, though, because I want to be able to talk to you and essentially, like I said before, catch up. There's a lot to go over. And something that is always noticeable around this time of the year is the way that the media covers the 9/11 truth issue. So I'll be going over some of that tonight. I'll be going over some articles that came out highlighting some of the ones that I think are more impressive than others. They'll be talking about the dwindling number of bad ones I noticed this year. You know, every year that we have an anniversary event in New York City, we did this year, premiering the Firefighters film that AE 9/11 Truth is putting out on DVD. Every time that AE 9/11 Truth does something, they kind of come out of the walls, the corporate media people writing their little attack pieces. And we had some of that this year, but not as much as you would think. You can see the attitude is somewhat changing, and the tone that is changing now that those old attack methods are not working anymore. And of course, that's thanks to the efforts of you out there in the listening audience, doing everything you can to keep this issue alive, to keep the fires burning. And no doubt this fire is getting out of hand for the people that want to keep it contained. You know, all the people that have tried to say, don't look at Building 7 falling. Oh, no, random fires caused that to happen. And ironically, this fire of 9/11 Truth is going to cause the entire official story to come crashing down in maybe not 7 seconds like Building 7 did, but pretty swiftly, I think. So before I get off into that, let me talk about what I did on the September 11th anniversary. I spent it out here on the West Coast. I did some work for AE 9/11 Truth, bringing some merchandise to an event that was being held by No Lies Radio over in Oakland, featuring 9/11 films, discussions about other 9/11 related topics, and essentially delivering the merchandise and for our workers there to table and reach out to people. And then, actually, that was the day before 9/11, if I recollect. And then I had a couple of interviews to fill in for the next day. So I want to give a shout out to Mr. Mark McNaught and David McGowan at the Talking Heads show over at independencelive.net. They got a nice little show there, and I guess it's based out of Scotland, even though the hosts are located in various places around the world. Very interesting guys, very fun to talk to. I regretted that I had to go off and go on to the next interview because I was enjoying my time with them. But that is available on the net. Just look up independencelive.net and Andrew Steele, and you can see that. And we had a really cool discussion for an entire hour. Very professional guys, very informed guys, so I encourage everybody to check that out and see what they have to say about the world situation, because it's a good perspective there. But that's what I did on the 9/11 anniversary, and I'm very happy to have this opportunity to participate in history right now. I think it's a privilege. It's an honor to stand with the people in the 9/11 Truth Movement, the people that are really the real leaders of America. The people are standing up and doing the right thing. You know, we had George Leopard on the show last week to talk about the 9/11 Truth issue from a Christian's perspective, but what unites everybody, regardless of what their religion is the fact that 9/11 Truth is the right thing to do. All right, to speak out when you see wrongdoing happen. And you don't have to believe in a higher power for that. You just got to believe in that part of you that can't be silent when you see injustice taking place in front of you. You know, it's that part of you when you're a kid and you see bigger kids picking on the littler kids that makes you speak out and stand up for them. And we need more of them. We need more folks to find that inner voice inside them. And it's becoming more socially acceptable. So you can see that reflected in the media coverage, like I said, that I'll get into in a few minutes here. I'm going to go over an article that was posted on 9/11 Blogger on September the 10th. It's called 9/11 Bombshells the Media Missed. And point by point, this article lays out important stories that broke over the years related to 9/11 Truth that the media, of course, turned the other way from and should have, of course, covered. I'm going to read the points in this article that are related to us and our mission here on the show to the science of the controlled demolitions in New York on 9/11. But the article begins, in the 14 years since the September 11th attacks, there have been numerous highly newsworthy stories that were grossly underreported or outright ignored by the major media. Even so-called alternative media have not done their job in reporting this subject. Some, like the Huffington Post and Daily Kos, have policies censoring 9/11 questions. If any of the following stories had been properly reported, it could have sparked a public demand for a new investigation. Here are the few bombshells that were missed. 1. Suppressed oral histories corroborate demolitions. On August 12, 2005, the New York Times announced the release of more than 12,000 pages of oral history in the form of transcripts of interviews with 503 firefighters and emergency medical responders. The interviews were conducted between October of 2001 and January of 2002 under the direction of Thomas Van Essen, who was New York City's fire commissioner at the time of the attack. Among the eyewitness observations preserved in the oral histories are accounts of hearing and feeling explosions and ground tremors, as well as seeing dust clouds and debris flying from the Twin Towers as they were coming down. 2. 9/11 Press for Truth. In 2006, a documentary about the September 11th attacks was released. The film features interviews with the Jersey Girls, 4 widows whose husbands were killed in the World Trade Center attacks and who were convinced that the truth about 9/11 was being suppressed by the government. They and other family members pushed relentlessly for answers until finally the federal government reluctantly formed the 9/11 Commission. The Jersey Girls became members of the Family Steering Committee and was tasked with providing questions for the commission to answer. But to their disappointment and dismay, a full 70% of their questions were ignored by the commission and never answered in the commission's final report. Without the advocacy of the Jersey Girls, there would never have been an investigation, shallow and contrived though it was, into the biggest terrorist attack on U.S. soil in history. Unbelievably, their Press for Truth documentary was ignored by major media. 5. Explosive expert says WTC-7 was a controlled demolition. In 2007, Europe's top demolition professional, Danny Jowenko, was shown footage of World Trade Center Building 7's destruction on the afternoon of September 11, 2001. After watching Building 7 fall, Jowenko declared with absolute certainty that it was brought down by explosives in a controlled demolition. His reaction can be seen here. 6. NIST admits to the free fall of Building 7. In November of 2008, after being criticized by physics teacher David Chandler, the National Institute of Standards and Technology finally admitted that World Trade Center Building 7 came down at free fall in the first few seconds of its collapse. NIST had previously maintained that free fall was an impossibility since the structural components in the lower floors of the building would have provided resistance and prevented it from falling at the speed of gravity. Hence, NIST's stunning admission means that either the impossible occurred or that World Trade Center 7 had to have been brought down with explosives. 7. Scientific paper on nanothermite. In April of 2009, a scientific paper was published by a team of independent researchers who discovered a highly engineered explosive incendiary material in several dust samples collected near the World Trade Center site. In their paper titled Active Thermitic Material Discovered in Dust from the 9/11 World Trade Center Catastrophe, these 9 scientists, led by Professor of Chemistry Niels Harrit from the University of Copenhagen, concluded the red layer of the red-gray chips we have discovered in the World Trade Center dust is active, unreacted thermitic material incorporating nanotechnology and is highly energetic pyrotechnic or explosive material. We're going to skip to number 9, 1,000 architects and engineers. On February 19th, 2010, press conferences were held around the country by 1,000 architects and engineers who called for a new investigation into the destruction of the Twin Towers and Building 7 on 9/11. Yet there was no media coverage. Today, architects and engineers from 9/11 Truth membership includes more than 2,350 and counting licensed and/or degreed architects and engineers. Number 10, the Toronto hearings. On September 8th to the 11th, 2011, in honor of the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, expert witnesses gathered at Ryerson University in Toronto, Canada, to present evidence-based research that called into question the official story. The event was known as the Toronto hearings on 9/11. Over a period of 4 days, experts in structural engineering, physics, chemistry, history, and philosophy gave professional testimony to an international panel of distinguished judges. Afterward, the panel of judges, in conjunction with the hearing steering committee, would go on to publish their final analysis of the evidence and call for a new investigation. So you can read this article up at 9/11 Blogger currently, but this is just more of the same over the years. The media turns its head, but it's not going to be able to do that for much longer. Now, I got this other article. Now, this goes a little bit out of our mission, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but it's from the London Guardian. It says, Karzai calls al-Qaeda a myth and denies 9/11 attacks were plotted in Afghanistan. And the line beneath it says, on the eve of the anniversary of the 2001 attacks, the former president of Afghanistan expressed doubt that the terrorist group was responsible. His actual quote cited in this article is, I don't know if al-Qaeda existed and I don't know if they exist. I have not seen them and I have not had any report about them, any report that would indicate that al-Qaeda is operating in Afghanistan. It is, for me, a myth. For us, they don't exist. So, again, this goes outside of the mission of AE 9/11 Truth, and I want to stick to the science of the building demolitions on that day. Basically, the reason I want to bring this up on the show, other than to point out that interesting little factoid about 9/11 and 9/11 Truth-related information, is it goes to show you that even people who are players in the big game, you know, again, this guy was put in place by the U.S. to run Afghanistan after 9/11, you know, this guy doesn't even get the full picture of what's going on. This guy's not even sure of what is the full truth himself. And so if that's the case with a guy who was put in charge of running an entire country for us, basically, you know, what's that say about others who may not be put into such a high position of power, people in the military, bureaucrats working at NIST, overseeing the official reports, only getting a piece of it, being part of a piece of it. You know, they don't know the full truth either, one could assume. And probably assume right, because it's sort of the way that these things work. That's sort of the way that government reports work and operations work. It's a need-to-know basis in many cases. And if you don't need to know a particular component of something, then you don't need to know it. You don't need to have any part of it. And for a lot of people who are basing their career on government work, caring about that pension, putting kids through college, wanting to save up for that engagement ring for their fiance they're hoping to pop the question to, these more pressing things to their lives, more important factors in their minds in many cases, not the death of 3,000 people, but their own immediate concerns, that answer is good enough, not knowing the full picture. And this, I believe, contributes to the greater problem that we're facing. I mean, aside from people just not caring. And I'm not going to say not everyone cares. Obviously, the people listening to the show care. The people who support AE 9/11 Truth care. The people who have signed their name to that petition. Again, 2,300 architects and engineers calling for a new investigation into the destruction of the 3 towers that fell on 9/11. Not to mention the countless tens of thousands of other supporters who are not architects and engineers but have common sense and have a basic understanding of physics and know when they're being lied to. I'm not talking about them, but just the overall genuine malaise that has taken over a lot of people, or people's apathy in the face of focusing on more immediate concerns. And I understand that somebody who perhaps has been diagnosed with cancer or something of that crucial personal importance, something like that requires their immediate attention. They may not be able to focus on the bigger world picture, right? But they don't see everything that's going on. So you can't assume that just because somebody worked at NIST and may have authored a particular paragraph or section of the report that they even know the entirety of what went on behind the scenes. You can't assume that just because somebody served in the Pentagon on that fateful day and was involved in the response to the 9/11 attacks or was privy to some of the inner talk, that they knew all of the inner talk, or that somebody who was in the towers knew exactly what was going on inside the towers. I mean, at the AIA convention, we had one delegate from New York go up, and essentially his whole argument was that he was there on that day. Now, does that disprove any of the physical evidence that has been collected by AE 9/11 Truth, like the analysis on the dust samples, the study of the destruction of the buildings, the physics? Of course it doesn't. Anybody arguing with a rational mind will know that an argument like that, I was there that day, that does not disprove any of this evidence. And as a matter of fact, we have witnesses who agree with us, who were also there that day. So, again, this appeal to authority argument, it's not even an appeal to authority, it's more of an appeal to emotion, really goes nowhere. And the system, and again, when I say the system or the establishment, it's just a simplistic way of kind of bringing together this collective, self-concerned media and government system full of individuals that are doing everything they can to not have to do something about this issue. So every time the system does that, they bankrupt themselves even more. You can only play that card for so long before people start seeing through it, before they start getting sick of it. They start getting apathetic to that too. And you can see this now. So I wanted to highlight those articles, even though they don't have anything to do with controlled demolition, to really give you an accurate idea of what we are up against. Because a lot of times people assign motivations to gatekeepers that sound more conspiratorial, quote-unquote, than maybe even what the reality is. And I've said it so many times before on this show that people usually don't do something they would rather not do unless they're afraid of something else. People put off things. It's like the husband who sits around at home and watches football. He's been getting nagged by his wife for an entire year to fix something, maybe fix the stairs, and then finally the stairs give, or somebody almost kills themselves going down it, and now he's got to do something about it. Now he's afraid of going down those stairs, so he's got to fix it. And at this point, 9/11 has been allowed to become so insulated, been allowed to be taken over by the so-called experts. And when I say experts, I'm talking about the politicians who went there to grandstand after the event happened and put their arms around firefighters and associate themselves with the heroism of the firefighters on that day, so that people associate in their minds the post-9/11 response with the real heroics of those individuals that went into those towers, even after they saw the first one go down, knowing that the second one might meet the same fate. Those heroics, associating themselves with that people defer to that authority, and that event was so contained that they just figure it's all been taken care of, or they figure that they can't do anything about it anyway, that this is so out of their reach, that this is so big that they have no power. And we've proven time and time again at AE 9/11 Truth, just through the efforts of our own volunteers, a lot of time individual volunteers, who have done something, who have managed to get their name in the paper talking about the evidence, getting exposure for this issue. And in this modern day of the internet, you get your local newspaper to cover this issue. Just about every local newspaper now has a web page that publishes the same stuff that's in print. So it's not just going out to that circulation in that district or that area. It's going out all over the world. So it's making that imprint into the big, great Library of Alexandria, modern-day version that we know of as the World Wide Web. So just that small thing, that small effort from that one person. And, of course, the natural next step to that is to think about what would happen if everybody was doing something, or at least, a larger percentage of people were doing something. Look what people did on C-SPAN. They got Richard Gage on the program simply by calling in every single day. Washington Journal saw the response to some of their less than neutral 9/11 Truth coverage or responses to callers, and they answered it, and they had Richard Gage on. It was a great interview. So people have tremendous power. They simply need to understand they have that power and figure out any little thing they can do every day to get the word out. So anyway, I talked in the beginning about how the coverage of this issue is changing with each passing anniversary. And I want us to see in the next year us push this issue so much more to the forefront that the issue goes from being sort of acknowledged and talked about in a neutral tone that I'm seeing happen more and more now to being covered in more positive light and more accepting light. Right now this was the 14th anniversary, and the 14 is a number that doesn't really stick in people's minds. It falls after 13, comes before 15. It's not one of those benchmark numbers that you really think about all that much. And 15 is a more significant number. That's something that is kind of like an end to something or beginning of something else. I don't know. Maybe that's not making sense to you. It makes perfect sense to me, though. But it just seems like a more significant number, is what I'm saying. So I want to see by the 15th anniversary, us have even more coverage of this, more positive coverage, more understanding coverage, more, and for the people that were speaking negative about us, for them to speak more neutrally about the issue. On the anniversary, or just during the anniversary, throughout it, the next day, I was going into Google News and just typing in architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. Now, this is not a scientific study on my part. I'm simply just kind of poking around on the internet and seeing what I observe. But I noticed that a lot of the articles that came up, at least on that day or in the day that followed, were very positive because they were belonging to websites, alternative news websites, that have figured out that if you get into the Google News stream, your news is going to be carried even further. I figured this out myself when I was blogging independently before I became more involved with AE 9/11 Truth and in the position that I'm in now. And there was a website, I won't mention their name because I'm not sure if they want to be mentioned, but that they were in the Google News search. And I figured out that if I could get articles jumping on every 9/11 Truth related issue that came up, I could essentially get that into the public consciousness. Like, for example, Richard Mendenhall. He was a football player who tweeted out or put on Facebook, one of those two, something when Osama bin Laden was allegedly killed on May 1st, 2011. First chastising Americans for celebrating somebody's death, but what really ticked off the corporate media was when he said that we still don't know what really happened to those towers. And so every sports writer, almost like on cue, almost like they're getting an order or something, it seemed like, can't know that for certain, but it just seemed to just jump on him. That seemed to be the flavor of the week in the sports world. So whenever you typed in Richard Mendenhall, that's what you came up with. Richard Mendenhall's comments are disgusting. Richard Mendenhall sticks his foot in his mouth. All of this just collective, swarming tactic, mass peer pressure nonsense that the corporate media exists for, basically. Not to inform, but to handle public opinion. So what I figured to do is I'm going to start writing about Richard Mendenhall, and I'm going to compliment him. I'm going to say he's telling the truth, and this is why. And here's the architects and engineers that'll back him up. And I even put it in the headline. Writers attacking Richard Mendenhall. I forgot. It was a really loaded headline. I used to do that. Maybe that's a little bit obnoxious. I've kind of changed it a little bit in my activism and how I pursue things over the years. I'm a little bit more mellow than I used to be. But I would do that. I would even call out the writers for what they were doing right in the headline, so that when anybody Googled Richard Mendenhall, amidst all of these attack pieces, you saw that beacon of support from Andy Steele. And also, if writers were Googling their own news stories on the news feed and they saw that they were being called out for their shoddy coverage of the whole issue, that might prompt them to read it. Well, apparently, over the years, I took my attention off of it, other bloggers have figured this out and have gotten their own blogs registered with Google News so that they could get their stories out there into the public consciousness too, not just with 9/11 but other issues, and this is a very smart thing to do. I don't know off the top of my head the full guidelines for what Google News requires from you in order to be put in their feed, but I do remember one of their main things was that you can't just be reposting other news stories. You've got to be creating your own content. There's lots of websites that do that, and I just want to put that word out that you should get into the Google News feed. Start overtaking the corporate mouthpieces. Start getting the truth out there about issues, such as the 9/11 controlled demolition evidence. Indeed, this is what I saw when I Googled architects and engineers for 9/11 truth in the Google News feed. I saw a number of articles that came up supporting us. I believe that the Global Research website was included in that. Off the top of my head, it was one of them. Very few negative ones. I'm not saying they didn't exist. Interestingly enough, I saw that Raw Story had reprinted an article from 2013, so they couldn't even get it together enough to write a new article. They were just rehashing that Chomsky said that bizarre thing about somebody spending an hour on the internet doesn't qualify them as an architect or an engineer, completely overlooking the fact that we have thousands of architects and engineers who didn't spend an hour on the internet that actually have degrees that have been verified, vetted, and have been sent to AE 9/11 Truth because that's part of the verification process. Completely overlooking that, but that's what Raw Story printed. They reprinted an article from 2013. I think that's a good sign. It just shows that, I don't know, they're lazy. They don't feel like doing it anymore. And we're starting to overtake the public voice. Our voice is getting louder in the great internet collective. So that's good. I did see there was an article by Brendan James, I believe it's the International Business Times, called The Lonely Life of Truthers. And this was sort of an indirect hit piece. It attempts to put out a neutral tone, but it does the same kind of patronization that you've seen before, that kind of talking down, talking about people who question the official story of 9/11 as if there's some oddity in a glass case that the general mainstream public is looking down at as and laughing at as some kind of curiosity, citing a psychologist to explain how the conspiracy theorists think. This is a tactic that's been used for many years, and it's hollow now, because many people who have woken up to this do not enjoy being talked down to. More people are turning off the corporate media and turning to the alternative news sources. I did have an article, though, I wanted to go over tonight. This is from Tell Magazine, which is out of Nigeria. And this was a piece by, and I want to make sure I don't mispronounce this name, so I'm going to do my best. It's Anthony Kaizi. And he had contacted AE 9/11 Truth looking for a statement from us, and we gave him one, and he printed a lot of it. And this is the most fair coverage that I've seen. Again, it's out of Nigeria. Now, this is a somewhat long article, but he did send me a JPEG of the 2 pages that this article filled up. Again, it's in a paper magazine, not on the internet as far as I know. But I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to read the part where we come in, AE 9/11 Truth. He starts off the article talking about 9/11 itself, how some Americans question the attacks, cites a Canadian writer who has his doubts about the way that the towers fell and Building 7. And then I'm going to start a little bit before I come into the picture here. It says, but beyond the matter of who actually was the brain behind the disaster, there are some who feel that, rather than the planes being responsible for the collapse of the Twin Towers, some other factor was. Among the people or group who feel so is an American agency called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, which is made up of architects, engineers, and affiliates focused on researching and revealing what they consider the truth about the 9/11 incident. Andrew Steele, the public relations manager and operations coordinator for the group, told the magazine recently that while Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth does not take a position on who was responsible for the attacks, it feels that the story about the Twin Towers collapsing simply as a result of the impact of the plane was untenable. We have studied publicly available information, including videos of the event, eyewitness reports, and independent analysis of the dust, as well as the official investigations conducted by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. We assert that the federal government's explanation is scientifically unsound and that the strongest hypothesis, which the evidence supports, is that explosives were used to bring the three towers down, he said. Efforts by the magazine to speak with NIST was unsuccessful, as an inquiry sent to the agency via email was not responded to as at press time last week. But the Institute's final reports on 9/11 is available on its website. The first is titled Federal Building and Fire Safety Investigation of the World Trade Center Disaster, Final Report of the National Construction Safety Team on the Collapse of the World Trade Center Towers, NIST NC Star 1. Really long title. The report states that the two aircraft hit the towers at high speed and did considerable damage to principal structural components, core columns, floors, and perimeter columns that were directly impacted by the aircraft or associated debris. It specifically notes that in World Trade Center 1, the fires weakened the core columns and caused the floors on the south side of the building to sag. The floors pulled the heated south perimeter columns inward, reducing their capacity to support the building above. While in WTC-2, the core was damaged severely at the southeast corner and was restrained by the east and south walls via the hat truss and the floors. The steady burning fires on the east side of the building caused the floors there to sag. For Building 7, which report was released in November of 2008, 3 years after that of the Twin Towers were made public, NIST also identifies fire as a primary cause for the building's failure. It explains that the fire on multiple floors in World Trade Center 7, which were uncontrolled but otherwise similar to fires experienced in other tall buildings, caused an extraordinary event. Heating of the floor beams and girders caused a critical support column to fail, initiating a fire-induced progressive collapse that brought the building down. Contrary to some people's claims, NIST holds that it found no corroborating evidence for alternative hypotheses suggesting that the buildings were brought down by controlled demolition using explosives or by missiles. I don't know where that missiles thing came in. They just threw that in there. I've not really heard anybody really explain that. But Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth believes NIST's investigation was not exhaustive. According to Steele, NIST's investigation failed to consider the controlled demolition hypothesis from the start, and the agency refuses to this day to run its own tests on World Trade Center dust samples for the presence of explosives or incendiaries, the chemical signature for which was found in WTC dust by independent scientists. As well, NIST investigation omitted important structural features in World Trade Center 7 that would have prevented its theory of what initiated WTC 7's collapse. The article continues. He further maintains that NIST also selectively ignored observable facts and the significance of World Trade Center 7's admitted freefall for 105 feet. Its investigation was not scientific or complete, and in the end only offered theories that don't hold up to the most basic scientific scrutiny. Apart from NIST, Steele feels that the Western media is lukewarm on the conspiracy theory but is rather fixated on the government angle. Most of the Western corporate media has not only chosen to look the other way from the glaring holes in the U.S. government's theories about the towers, but has collectively taken it upon itself to act as the protectors of those theories by attacking the people who openly support a new investigation, refusing to report key information related to the issue, and providing one-sided coverage of the debate. Such mindset, he said, along with having a chilling effect on the public's free speech and free thought, is also disrespectful to the 9/11 victims' family members who support us and our mission. To further argue its points, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth is set to unveil a new book titled Beyond Misinformation: What Science Says About the Destruction of World Trade Center Buildings 1, 2, and 7. In the introduction to the book, Ted Walter, the author and director of strategy and development, for Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, informs that much of the public, including a considerable number of architects, engineers, and scientists, do not accept the official explanation regarding the 9/11 disaster, and that among those who reject it, the most common explanation is that World Trade Center 1, 2, and 7 were destroyed in a procedure known as controlled demolition, whereby carefully placed explosives or other devices are detonated to bring down a structure in a desired manner. He further argues that September 11, 2001 aside, every total collapse of a steel frame high-rise building in history has been caused by controlled demolition. According to Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, the upcoming book is informed by the need to move our collective understanding of the World Trade Center destruction beyond misinformation so that we as a society may arrive at an accurate account of one of the most important events in our recent history. Divergent views indeed, this is the author of the article continuing on the last paragraph, divergent views indeed, perhaps one day a conclusion on what exactly happened would be arrived at. Now that is reporting, all right? It didn't say one way or the other what the author's opinion was. It gave both sides of the issue, presented it, and now people for themselves can go learn more and find out. My God, somebody in Nigeria showing the American corporate media how it's done. I love it. I love it. That's all we ask for, folks. I mean, a fair shake, a fair shot. There was a person from the New York Times. You may remember a few weeks ago when I had Ted Walter on this program talking about the activities that were going to be taking place in New York City at this time of the year on the anniversary. He talked about a billboard that was being put outside the New York Times on top of the mailing that was being sent to them of the Beyond Misinformation booklet. This writer is named John Schwartz. This is what he tweeted out. Great, the New York Hates Israel billboard right outside my window has been replaced with a 9/11 Truther billboard. He's a quote-unquote science writer for the New York Times. He's not happy about the billboard being outside his office window. But what do you expect when they don't report on the crime of the century? What do you expect when one of their chief correspondents, Mr. Sanger, says that they've not found any evidence for the controlled demolition? I'm paraphrasing. And that's what this billboard is calling them out for. Because the evidence is clear. The evidence has been laid out. And again, we're not asking the New York Times to come out and say they agree with us. We just want fair coverage. We want the facts reported and let the chips fall where they may. Let the public decide for themselves. But don't pretend that there's nothing there. Don't pretend that this controversy doesn't exist except for a few, fringe people here and there. Because that's not true. A lot of people have woken up to this. A lot of people question why the buildings fell so fast. That was acknowledged by Congressman Chris Smith when he was questioned about this on Washington Journal. I mean, he wanted to do everything he could to avoid the issue, of course. But he did, in a moment, maybe letting his guard down, I don't know, but he did acknowledge that, the unanswered questions. He, of course, didn't want to advocate for government doing anything about it, but maybe think tanks, maybe people who have no official power to do anything about it. That was essentially his message. So we got to keep on putting on the pressure. We got to continue our efforts of putting it in the face of the New York Times. The New York Times, of course, is one of the most relevant newspapers to this because the event happened right in their hometown. and keep on speaking out to those journalists who are open, and they are. You know, I've had somebody tell me, somebody in the corporate media, I can't say who, but said that we have a lot more allies out there in the corporate media than we think. Right? But they are under some strict guidelines on how they can report, what they can report, how they do it. You know, so sometimes you never know. Maybe some of these hit pieces are actually support in disguise. Maybe this is the only way they can get any information out to people. I don't know. That would be speculation to assert that that is a fact. But I have had that said that. I found that quote from Sanger. He said, "We've not found any evidence so far to suggest that the building collapses were caused by anything other than the two airplanes." That's what he said on Washington Journal one morning. And we're going to make them remember those words. Make those words live on through history. Let the people studying this time in history in the future look back and wonder what was wrong with America at this time. Why did people ignore what was right in front of them? Now, I want to talk about something that is going to be going out from AE 9/11 Truth this week. Actually, by the time this program airs, it should have already gone out to the supporters everywhere, and we are asking everybody who can, who is willing, who has a voice, who has 3 minutes to spare. Again, this is all it takes is 3 minutes, plus some planning time, of course. But anybody that is able, all able-bodied young men, but also able-bodied young women, or not-so-young men and not-so-young women, and even if you're not fully able-bodied, if you can get to City Hall to participate in this. This is an action alert that is going out this week. You should have already gotten it by this point if everything is going on schedule. I'm going to read it to you, the title of it, and it's going to appear in your inbox if you're a supporter of AE 9/11 Truth. But the subject line is, "Have something to say about 9/11? Try your city council." Give this simple World Trade Center 7 talk to your city council. It says, "Have you been thinking about sharing the message of 9/11 Truth with your local legislators? If so, those who have already taken the steps, such as Marvin Sands of Portland, Oregon, can assure you that it's possible, it's painless, and it's rewarding." All right, now listen here. Most city councils and town boards set aside a time, generally at the beginning of their meetings, for residents to address any subject that they choose. Typically, each speaker is allotted at least 3 minutes. Okay, so it might vary depending on your local area. You need to find out what the situation is there. But the speech that I'll be talking about in a minute has been written to fit within a 3-minute time frame. The bulletin goes on. "The public forum offers the perfect opportunity for you to present the evidence of the World Trade Center Building 7 to local officials and to request that they adopt a resolution calling for a new investigation of its destruction. We've written a 3-minute speech and resolution for you, so you don't have to sweat what to say. Simply click here to download the speech, the resolution, and the accompanying instruction." So there's a link in this action alert for you to download the speech. There's also going to be a video clip. We'll get to that in a minute. But the instructions are there. You read the speech very simply, just like people calling into Washington Journal had prepared what they wanted to say ahead of time. We've prepared for you what to say when you go in. And, of course, this goes along with my advice that I've given so many times, is to have your words prepared so you don't get on the spot and get nervous and start talking about other things and flubbing up your facts. Because that happens sometimes when people speak in front of crowds, especially if it's your first time. So it's all ready for you. Going on with the action alert, it says, "Most council meetings provide a VGA cable that enables speakers to show a video on a large screen at the front of the room. That's why we're providing you a 1-minute video clip of World Trade Center 7 coming down. You can download the video clip here and show it while you're making your speech. It's a silent clip, so the sound won't distract you while you're reading it, folks. All right. Once your audience watches World Trade Center 7 fall in 7 seconds, they will recognize right away that normal office fires, quote-unquote, could not have been the cause of the building's destruction. Not only will you be heard by local leaders, but your words and the video clip will probably be broadcast via public access television into the homes of all your neighbors who happen to be watching the session streamed live. Yeah, a lot of city councils are broadcast on public access. And people watch this stuff, you know. I mean, people are interested in local government still and just kind of generally interested in what's going on in their neighborhood and what the big changes taking place around them are. You know, what happens in your city council is most direct to what is happening in your immediate life. It's where the issues about potholes get settled. A lot of potholes in where I had come from or where I had worked before in Utica, New York. So they weren't doing much about it there. But that's where the issues of, you know, trash pickup are figured out and debated and decided. So a lot of people pay attention to that and want to get their 2 cents in on other issues. And if they happen to be there or watching when someone is talking about Building 7, they're going to get informed on the Building 7 evidence in these 3 minutes of your speech. What's more, if you make a video of yourself as you're giving your speech, you can upload it later to YouTube and ask us to share it on our Facebook page. All right? So you give your speech to the local city council, you ask them to adopt the resolution, and if you can, make a YouTube, and we will show it to everyone. We'll show everyone the hard work that you are putting forth for the super important cause, the crime of the century, the history you're taking part in. If you aren't comfortable with working with computers and AV equipment, feel free to leave the World Trade Center 7 clip out of your speech, or bring along a tech-savvy friend who can display the clip and record a video of you speaking. Here's another idea. You may want to take along some AE 9/11 Truth brochures and DVDs to pass out to interested council members and fellow citizens who are attending the meeting. And if you need to stock up on supplies, there's a link to the store there. Do you have any questions? Do you need advice on giving your presentation? Do you want some coaching tips? Or after you've delivered the speech, would you care to submit a YouTube video of yourself giving the presentation? For any and all of the above, you can write to the new email address we've set up for this project. And that email address is cityhall@ae911truth.org. And folks, I'll be monitoring that and I'll be helping you out. So if you want to get any advice or a little pep talk before doing it, write to that email address and we will be in touch and I will do what I can to help you out. Thank you for being willing to participate in this vital outreach to your local public officials and neighbors. Such grassroots actions are the most direct way to engage your community. If hundreds or even thousands of you talk about World Trade Center 7 in city halls across the country, the truth about 9/11 will begin to make a major incursion into the public consciousness. And that's right where it belongs. So folks, here it is, a direct plan of action. As you'll see when you read the speech that is going to be going out, obviously we understand that the city halls do not have jurisdiction over the federal government. The resolution is symbolic, but imagine if you can get your town to pass a resolution calling for a new investigation into Building 7. That'll put the town on the map. Think about how great that will be. Think of what kind of news that would make. Think about what kind of news that would make if we got several of them to do it. And like, seriously, I know this. I know that if you can get a town, an official body, to do this, it's a lot harder for the corporate media to ignore it. I'm not saying they won't try. I mean, they are what they are. We know the nature of the beast here. But it'll be a lot harder for them. If you get several of them, if people all over the country manage to get city councils to adopt a resolution, a symbolic resolution, calling for this new investigation, my God, that would be so hard to ignore. I mean, it would almost be sinful for them to ignore that. Again, this is the corporate media we're dealing with, so I'm not saying they won't try to. But when they ignore something like that, that just makes them look bad and makes us look better. It boosts our credibility with the people that it needs to be boosted with, the logical, rational-minded people who say, well, why isn't the media covering this? So anything that you can do to create that friction on the gears of this machine, anything that you can do to put the brakes on the soft elevator music that the media and our government try to generate to keep everybody sort of distracted and self-centered and focused on stuff that isn't as important as this issue, anything that you can do to interrupt that and break that transmission is a good thing. And it's creating outreach that didn't exist before. So I'm asking all of our supporters at AE 9/11 Truth, please do your best, print out a copy of the speech, try to show the video. If you can't show the video, don't worry about it. But try to participate in this effort. And again, the speech is under 3 minutes. It's very simple. It's very direct and to the point. It doesn't go into the entire evidence breakdown of Building 7. That's not possible to do in 3 minutes. But it does a very good job of laying out what some of the important points are and appealing to the city council members' common sense. And that's what you have to do when you've only got a few minutes to address this issue with someone. I mean, I guess in some weird way it's kind of beneficial that Building 7 came down as fast as it did, because it's just 7 seconds to show somebody why the official story doesn't make sense. Because just watching it fall, you know on its face that the official story is false. The normal office fires can't do that to a 47-story steel-framed high-rise. So all of the links are available. They're handy. And as well, founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, Richard Gage, did this. The video is available in this action alert. All right, so you can watch that. He did that in his hometown there. And of course, we had other volunteers who have done this in the past, so you can be part of this growing movement. And just some quick pointers to bring up, and we're getting towards the close of our show here, so I don't have a lot of time to go into it, so I'll sort of paraphrase them. Stay on the script. Stick with the message of the science. Don't go off into the weeds of other topics. Stick to what you had prepared. I made the mistake of going off the script one time in high school, reading something on the PA system, and it just sounded long and rambly and bad. So stick to the point. Be focused. And some people are worried about speaking in front of crowds, and I get that, but something you always got to remember is that the entirety of the movement is not resting on your shoulders. It's not up to you. You're not speaking to the United Nations of the world and having the entire future of 9/11 Truth rest on you. Now, your part is important, so I got to be careful with how I say that, because yes, you are absolutely needed in this vital effort. You need to be part of this army of people going out there and doing this thing, but give yourself a break. Don't build it up too much in your mind. Relax and enjoy the fact that you are making a difference. You know, and as something in the instructions in the speech point out is that everybody who has participated in changing history has been nervous at some point. All right, don't let the cool demeanor of the people on television or the people in the history books that you might view make you get a wrong impression on just how human they really were. You know, do you think Gandhi, the first time that he spoke in front of a crowd, felt 100% sure of himself? Everybody, for the first time they do something, is a little nervous. But there's no reason for you to be. And again, you have the support of an entire worldwide movement behind you. You got my support behind you, because if you do this, man, I'm going to think you're one of the coolest people ever. Right? So we're all behind you. We're all counting on you. And the only people that need to be afraid right now are the people who have perpetuated the 9/11 crime and the people who continue to cover it up, because their entire story is unraveling as we speak. And as we move forward into the next year, we're going to be doing even more stuff that's going to make the 15th anniversary even more special and even more critical in the history of this huge cause, of this huge movement that is going to change the world. I have no doubt that it will. And I think for the better. And I'm not one of these people who thinks that you're going to make the world a perfect place ever. There's always going to be some form of badness going on. But I think this is going to set the establishment and everything that's bothering us right now back on its ear for some time. So I'm asking everybody out there in the listening audience to do this action alert. Write to City Hall at ae911truth.org, and we will feature you on the Facebook page. We will talk about it on this show. And I want the supporters out there to know each other. I want people to see the people who are participating and care about this topic. I want America to see how not lonely it is. You know, the article talked about the lonely life of truth. There's actually from what I'm saying, the loneliness is being felt by the people who still buy the official story hook, line, and sinker. Because I'm not lonely at all. I'm part of a great community, a growing community. And I can't wait to meet more and more of you. So let's show them who is boss in this country. Let's take back our civic processes. Let's take back our country by acknowledging what is right in front of us, acknowledging 2 + 2 = 4, not 5, not buying the official lie that's been handed to us, and show what the American people are really capable of when they put their minds to it and when they believe in the truth. I know you all can do that, and I'm counting on you. So please, again, download the speech, go to your city council, write to City Hall at ae911truth.org if you have any questions, need any coaching, want to talk about it, or submit a YouTube video of yourself. And let's have at it. Let's unleash the power of this movement on our legislative processes locally. All right, we are out of time on this show, so I want to thank everybody for listening. Remember, you can hear this program every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download MP3s of this show from the Internet Archive by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week. Good luck.
If we're in a free country, why are we afraid to just talk about an event that was the most traumatic event in our history? I originally believed the official story. I aggressively defended it. When I first started cracking open that little window that there could be possibly more to this story, I went through every emotion, just like probably a lot of you here who didn't originally believe it or consider it are going through. And I didn't want to believe it. I came up with every excuse not to believe it.
Any building that succumbs to fire, that collapses, starts usually with large gradual deformations, and the building will begin to fall over, not straight down through the path of what was the greatest resistance. These buildings exploded. We have witnesses that hear sounds of explosions.
We started walking down the stairs. We made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails. Like you're in a foundry.
Yeah. Like lava.
Like lava.
Volcano. This is all direct evidence of explosive controlled demolition. Interesting thing is fire can't create any one of these, let alone all 10.
If the FDNY and other firefighters start speaking out about this, this is going to explode, and it's going to open a lot of people's eyes to what really happened. Make this a normal thing to talk about so that this will spread like wildfire. It's starting now. From speaking out and starting this website and meeting Richard and a lot of the other incredible people here tonight, I've also met some military intelligence officers that have taught me a lot. And I asked one of them, how do we win? We can't get through the media. We can't get through most of our friends and family because it's too scary to talk about. How do we do this? And he said, it's easier if you just shine the light. And he said, just come from a place of love and not fear. Shine the light.